chat. We post all the questions that are coming in from Instagram and Facebook on there as well, as lots of helpful, wonderful information. It's exciting to be back in the Great Sustainable Seafood Tour. We've got some fun new treats this year from last year to continue to expand our seafood repertoire, and great guests. Of course, this evening we've got Michael Garcia with us out in the vineyard. He's our estate viticulturalist. Then we've got Brooke Shenk, our winemaker at the winery. And we have Peter Adame joining us from Monterey to talk about sustainable seafood. And of course, I know everybody's favorite, mine included, Chef Todd. I'm going to say it right now. He's keeping my home cooking game really moving along. So I love everyone, but you know, Chef Todd does teach me new skills too. I really appreciate that. So without further ado, let's jump over to Michael Garcia and see what's going on in the vineyard. Gosh, it's fantastic there, 73 degrees. Thanks, Ryan, for muting me. Beautiful blue sky. Michael Garcia, tell us what's going on out in the vineyard. Looks like things are starting to move along pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are moving along very quickly. I think a couple of weeks ago we were talking about bud break occurring, and if you look behind me here in parcel 10, we are very far beyond bud break. We've got shoots a couple feet long on our hillsides. We're starting to see some flowering going on, so things are moving quickly.
That's exciting. It's a lot of fun to see it moving. You got a lot of wind out there today, not a lot of rain, but you know, let's keep this temperate weather. I like the temperate weather and a nice, cool, even growing season. I know you've been over in, we're drinking 2020 Sauvignon Blanc today. Some people may be drinking the 2019. But can you show us what you took some photos of parcel 14 where the 2020 Sauvignon Blanc is solely coming from this vintage, and tell us about what's going on with the Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, so the video we're looking at now is parcel 14 this morning, and it's not far behind the Malbec parcel I'm standing in right now. You can see the shoots are a couple feet long. We're not quite seeing flowering in parcel 14, but you know, we've done our suckering. We are just starting to move wires, which will help with this wind, so we don't get shoots breaking, and we'll get those shoots in a vertical upright position. And things are looking good in parcel 14.
Yeah, it looks nice and healthy. It looks almost like it's a plant that had rain. How are the buds looking? Are we going to have a good crop?
Yeah, it looks like it. You know, right now we can, you know, go around and count our flower clusters and kind of get an estimate based on that. But we'll refine our crop estimate after flowering occurs and we know how much fruit has set this wind, or if we got some rain or other, you know, events during flowering, we might, you know, see set vary. And then as we move through veraison, we'll start to see the size of the clusters and get a better gauge on that. With the dry year, the clusters have potential to be a little bit smaller. So we'll see if there's any variability in our crop size.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to a wonderful harvest this year. It's starting to feel like it's going to be early. We hope you all get an opportunity to come out and join us and see harvest, or just come and visit anytime soon. What else is going on out in the vineyard? So you've been suckering, you've been out there getting up at 2 a.m. to protect us from frost and turning on fans and fighting the frost demons. So thank you for that. What else is going on?
Yeah, it's nice that we fingers crossed, we're hope that frost season is starting to come to a close. But yeah, we've mostly been doing that. We're doing a little bit of grafting work. So parcel 14 was grafted to our own St. Supéry clone of Sauvignon Blanc, clone 1, selected by Michael Scholes. And we just last fall grafted parcel 18C, and it's rootstock that was planted, you know, to match the soils that we have there. 18C is interesting because we ended up burying the rootstock and that's because it's a frost prone parcel. And thankfully we buried it, so that protected the bud that we put in it from the few frost events that we were kind of seeing over the past month. And we just started uncovering it today, and things are looking good in that regard. So grafting, uncovering, that's some other things we're doing.
That's great. It's fun to see the new plantings. That's over on the east side of the ranch, where we get a little higher magnesium soil. So that'll be, another different flavor profile than some of the other spots on the property. But also tonight we're tasting a little Moscato. So how's the Moscato looking? I know you got a little bit of frost on that, but how's that? Oh, it looks good. Look at those big leaves.
Yeah, that's a photo we took this afternoon, and you can see the wind and the flower cluster there. So we did get a little bit of frost in the middle of our Moscato. As you know, we're not using water to frost protect this year, and we have frost fans, but they don't cover the area that sprinklers might. And we got pretty cold about a week ago, a week and a half ago at this point, down to about 28 degrees. So most of our Moscato was protected, but a little got frosted. So the crop will be slightly lighter this year. And as you know, we didn't get any Moscato harvested last year because of the fires. So stock up on your 2019 St. Supéry Moscato.
Well, I have to say it's kind of fun to see this shot today of the Moscato after just seeing the Sauvignon Blanc, because you really can see the ampelographical difference between the leaves. That Moscato leaf really saw blade edges, the teeth on that just ching, 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 super saw bladey, and the Sauvignon Blanc, those gentle ridges that are just sort of like a little wave across the top, and the rounder soft teeth looking pretty good. And so it's just kind of fun to see that. If you're out during the growing season, we're happy to take you on an ampelographical tour. It's always fun to check out the vines before they go through veraison, because it's a good guessing game, a good parlor trick if you need an extra one when you take your friends to wine country. So it's all looking good out there, Michael. Get a good night's sleep for once. We need you still strong for harvest, right?
Absolutely.
Thanks for that. Let's jump over to Brooke. She's at the winery in Rutherford. Brooke Shenk, our winemaker, and we can talk a little bit about the similarities between making Sauvignon Blanc and making Moscato. And I think just about everybody's drinking the 2020 Sauvignon Blanc, but if anyone's drinking a different Sauvignon Blanc of ours, do jump in and let us know, and we can pepper Brooke with some questions there. So Brookie?
Yeah, so we of course will utilize the cold temperatures that we get in Napa Valley during harvest. So it could be 50 degrees or below, or at night, or below that at night. And then we get 90 plus degree days. So we have this huge diurnal shift, which makes another reason why we can grow such fantastic wines. So we start harvesting the whites and the reds actually about 2 a.m. at night. We'll start picking, and that allows the grapes to come in cold. It also allows people to be picking in more pleasant temperatures. And the grapes coming in cold is important because it helps preserve the acidity and the aromatics and the flavor profile. So you can see on both the Sauvignon Blanc and the Moscato, it's an aromatic. They're both aromatic wines, and picking at night helps that. So once the grapes come in, they will go through they'll be destemmed. We will compost all the stems out into the vineyard. All the juice and the grapes and everything goes through our press. The press acts as a juicer, so it separates the juice and the skins and the seeds. And the skins and the seeds will stay back in the press. All of the juice will go to stainless steel tanks, and we'll actually settle that juice in those tanks pretty cold for a couple of days. So we set them at 40 degrees. And the reason we do that is because if you think of orange juice with the pulp in orange juice, grape juice has pulp as well. So we settle that pulp to the bottom of the tank, and then we rack the juice off. And if you, this is obviously wine in my glass, but if we look at the juice after we rack it, it's almost as clear as the wine is. It's obviously has sugar in it, so it's a little more viscous, but it starts off really, really clear. And then we'll warm up the wines and ferment both Sauvignon Blanc and Moscato in stainless steel. However, we kind of treat them differently at this point because obviously we're making Sauvignon Blanc in one style and Moscato in a different style, and they are standalone varieties.
Yeah, I know you're always like a little stressed out when you're making the Moscato because you've got to chill that tank down so fast. And I know it worries you because you're constantly, testing and tasting it to get it just right. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, fermentation is so active. The yeast is eating that sugar, it's creating carbon dioxide, it's creating heat, it's creating alcohol, and it wants to go really fast. And we control that with temperature on the tanks, and we force it to go pretty slow. And so it, with the Sauvignon Blanc, we're fermenting completely dry so that there's no sugar left at all. But with the Moscato, we are going to leave some sugar in there. And so we have to taste those tanks every day. And sometimes when we get close to where we think the sugar level is, we need to get balance on that acidity and the sugar. And so if we start getting close and that yeast is still ticking, then we'll cool down the tank maybe by 5 degrees. But when we get to the perfect spot where we want to stop it, we chill it down to 30 degrees. So that ferment and juice is not gonna, or I guess it's must at that point because it's wine and sugar. It's not going to freeze because it has alcohol in it. So our Moscato has about 11% alcohol in it. And so it's not going to freeze, but it is going to stop that yeast in its tracks, hopefully. It's kind of hard to stop it in its tracks because it wants to keep eating that sugar. So it's always a bit of a sigh of relief once we get it into bottle because I know it's not going to ferment anymore.
Well, we've got a couple of questions actually about the Moscato. PJ is asking, what's the difference between Muscat de Canelli or Muscat d'Asti? Of course, other than the bubbles.
Yeah, so definitely the bubbles is a big thing because the Muscat d'Asti has very, 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 very carbonated. So our Moscato does have higher carbonation than the Sauvignon Blanc does or other varieties that we make, but it's not as carbonated as that Muscat d'Asti. And then beyond that, I have to admit, I don't know much of the differences, which I feel stupid about. So I'm sorry about that.
No, you shouldn't. So, I mean,
PJ probably could tell us what the difference is because I think he will know.
They are actually both the same varietal. So Muscat Canelli is also called Muscat Blanc, which is the same varietal, but you're going to see that Muscat d'Asti not just being a little effervescent, but also a little bit sweeter than and lower alcohol than where we're stopping ours. So that and the difference in climate, of course, between the two regions, it's going to be a little cooler up there. So, some of those differences, but we love wine because we get to taste wine from all over the world. Dezel's drinking a Villa Maria Sauvignon Blanc in his glass tonight. So, you're allowed to drink anything as long as you're drinking a great wine. And joining us. And we also, I saw, who was it? Somebody else was drinking a 2019 Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc. So that's going to have a little bit of the barrel fermentation in there, a little bit of texture. That's right. It was Marin in Pittsburgh. And we've got a couple, Miriam's just asking about the different temperature fermentation between the Sauvignon Blanc and the Moscato, and any other comments on why on that.
Yeah, so with the Sauvignon Blanc and the Moscato, we're going pretty slow, but with the Moscato, we're probably fermenting it maybe a degree or two warmer during ferment. So when I say that, the Sauvignon Blanc could be fermented anywhere from like 53 to 57 degrees, just depending on where it is in the fermentation. And then the Moscato, we're fermenting more like 53 the whole ferment. And then, like I say, as we start to get close to that perfect balance, then we're backing it maybe 5 degrees off at a time until we have to put that hard chill on it.
Yeah, and PJ is saying the fruit and aromatics are very similar between the two, the Asti and our Moscato, and that's probably varietally driven because the Muscat Canelli or Muscat Blanc is it's a little bit greater acidity, not quite so flabby as like a Muscat of Alexandria. When you get a Moscato from the Central Valley, you'll often get Muscat Alexandria, and it's been the fermentation's been halted a lot earlier than Brooke halted, where you're at about 6% alcohol. So you're looking at almost double the sugar left in the glass, and so and not the acidity that you're seeing from Moscato grown in Napa Valley with those diurnal shifts that we have here.
I think I need to do some research on Muscat DSD. That'll be on my homework.
Dezel's asking, Brooke, outside of California, what's one of your favorite wine regions for Sauvignon Blanc?
Well, I am very prone to New Zealand because I worked there for 2 years. And I know very well Villa Maria, but because I worked down the street and I worked for a winery called Wither Hills in Marlborough. So I'd have to say that's where my heart is, because that's kind of where I learned a lot about Sauvignon Blanc. And I came from New Zealand to St. Supéry in 2006.
Well, and you brought a lot of great skills and make some fantastic Sauvignon Blanc for us. I say I'd have to vote for the Loire, and that Dagenau I think is one of the greatest Sauvignon Blancs, and all of the ones that they make are really quite fantastic. But then there's Bordeaux. Oh, it's so hard to decide. We'll have to try them all again soon. Just wonderful there on the wine. Please do share your notes and thoughts, Dezel, PJ. You two are always sharing great notes on the wines that it's fun for everybody to read your wonderful presentation. But let's jump over and chat here with Peter Adame. And those of you who've been with us for a long time, remember Peter from the Monterey Bay Aquarium last year. He shared some important tips with us on sustainability and fish-friendly farming and aquaculture, and how to make the right choices when you're in the grocery store or the restaurant. So Peter, thanks so much for joining us again. It's really wonderful to have you. You're now with Loose America Foods as their sustainability manager, and you know everything about sustainable seafood. So it's wonderful to have you with us and to check in with you again. If you want to maybe share with everybody a little bit about the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the Seafood Watch and what they do and what sustainable seafood means to you.
Great. Thank you, Emma. It's such a pleasure to be back with you all. It's really fun that you guys do these lives, and I just think it's such a fun, cool idea. So as Emma mentioned, I used to be with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. If you're not familiar with it, it's an amazing aquarium and institution in Central California along the coast, and their mission is to inspire conservation of the ocean, and so protecting our beautiful ocean. And the aquarium's able to inspire people through their visitors by showing them the wonders of our ocean. But another amazing thing about the aquarium is that they had their own division of conservation and science, which is where I worked. And they had a team of research scientists that are studying white sharks and bluefin tuna, yellowfin tuna, and sea otters. They also had a policy team at the aquarium working to, lobby and support better laws to protect our coastline and struggling species. And they also had a program called Seafood Watch, which basically is a free guide to help people make better seafood choices for a healthy ocean. I know it can be a little funny to hear about an aquarium talking about eating seafood, but when we're working to protect our ocean, one threat to our ocean is the seafood industry. And so we would just want to make sure we're supporting it in a positive light.
Yeah. And, that is so important because, we hear a lot of negative things and a lot of positive things. And, there's so much of the sustainable seafood, particularly that Chef's going to make tonight, really is helping us keep a healthy oceans by having those oysters farmed, by having our clams farmed, our scallops. So tell us a little bit about the difference between, standard fishing and sustainably fishing and sustainably farming from our oceans, and how to make some good choices there.
Yeah. So when you step back, seafood is such a great protein. It's a low carbon footprint, it's super nutritious. And so when we talk about environmental sustainability, there's a couple key criteria that scientists will look at. They'll look at how are the fish populations doing? They'll look at bycatch. That's accidental catch of things that they might not be trying to catch. So maybe accidental catch of sharks, turtles, or whales. Depending on the fishing method, some are very selective, and it's a way to reduce that impact on those species. We'll also look at habitat impacts as well, and management. So here in the United States, we have really great management and regulations in place, but a lot of people don't realize how much seafood's imported. So we'll look at, okay, in those other countries, what kind of regulations are in place? And wild seafood is just one way we get our seafood, right? And I find it fascinating that it's really the last wild hunt on our planet for commercial food, right? Everything is farmed today. Beef, produce, chickens, right? And so aquaculture is farming in the water. Agriculture is farming on land. Aquaculture is farming in the water. And so there's a whole nother suite of criteria that scientists will look at. And so they'll look at, what are they feeding the fish at the farm? Where's the waste from the farm going? Do they have any issues with disease or antibiotic use? Is that impacting other fish that are in the wild nearby? And so Seafood Watch has all of this info that they do, all this research that they do that's peer reviewed, and it's all publicly available online. And they break it down into an easy to use traffic light system. So a green, yellow, red list to help businesses and consumers essentially make better seafood choices and be conscious consumers.
I think one of the things about that list that always is important to me is sometimes I'll see the same fish in green, yellow, or red, but it depends where it's coming from and how it's getting to me. And so that's a really important part of the decision. Can you kind of talk to that and on where your seafood is coming from and how that differs?
Absolutely. So a lot of times the sustainability rating really does depend on where it's coming from. I mean, fish populations are doing well in some parts of the world and not in others. It does vary, even when we talk about, every country has their own regulations and management in place, some better than others. A lot of the seafood we eat today does come from Southeast Asia and Latin America. And so I encourage consumers to really pay a little bit more attention on where your seafood's coming from. If you're at the grocery store, you can look at the label. It might be really fine print. Or if you're at the restaurant, a role you can play is just asking, hey, do you know where your salmon's from? Even if you're not an expert on sustainable seafood, consumers just asking questions and showing that's important to them is enough to really make a difference. Because when consumers show it's important, then that's when we see restaurants and the big retailers today making these commitments towards sustainable seafood and phasing out those red rated products for us.
Yeah, I've got a question here from Greg for you. What are the impacts of farming when aqua farms do not move their foundation?
When they do not move their foundation, I don't know if I quite understand the question.
I think maybe he's meaning like they just stay in one spot solely.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different types of farming methods, right? There's these marine net pens that are out in the water, and those are free flowing, right? And so they can have a little bit more impact on the environment, right? And the other wildlife that's nearby. Whereas if you're farming, for example, in a land-based aquaculture system, I mean, even if you thought of like the aquarium, for example, how they house fish, there's fish farms that are on land. And while that might not sound like the most natural option, it's actually very sustainable because you can control so many aspects of it. You're not having these extra impacts on the environment.
Yeah, I think Star Nikolai caviar is one of the best examples of that, where, I mean, they're keeping a really healthy closed system, quite remarkable, even filtering with lettuce that they sell. It's amazing. There's another question from Miriam. Are some countries more sustainable than others?
Yes, definitely that's the case. It can be really confusing, though, for consumers to try to keep tabs on all this, right? And so seafoodwatch.org is going to be that great free resource. Again, I highly encourage you to support our US fishermen when possible, and aquaculture farmers too, because they really are doing a lot to support our ocean. It looks like we have some visuals now that might be playing, and this is actually kind of exciting. I work at Loose America Foods, and we're a seafood wholesaler, and we're building new partnerships with a lot of the local fishermen here on the West Coast. And so this is Scott Fosmark, one of the fishermen we're working with out of Moss Landing Harbor, which is in Monterey Bay. And they are catching all of these fantastic species that are right here off the West Coast. And a kind of group name for them is groundfish, or bottom fish is sometimes the name you'll hear. They're the bottom dwelling fish here along the West Coast in the ocean. And they include fish like rockfish, also known as rock cod. Sometimes it's labeled as Pacific snapper. Another one is black cod, also known as sablefish. There's also petrale sole, Dover sole. There's all these fantastic options that are available to us, and that I encourage consumers to try and to explore, because this actually used to be the staple here on the West Coast. But in the late 90s, it was overfished, and the fishery actually did collapse. And so they had to close the fishery down, and then they got scientists together, researchers, environmentalists, fishermen, and they came up with a better science-based plan. How can we regulate the fishery, right? And so that entails new fishing quotas, so they can only catch a certain amount each year of each species, aerial closures to avoid sensitive habitat, gear modifications, and these species have bounced back really fast. Scientists thought it would take roughly 80 years for this fishery to recover, and it only took 14. So in 2000 was when it collapsed. In 2014, a bunch of these 21 different species of groundfish were actually upgraded from the red rating to either yellow or green. So it's a great example about how our ocean is resilient too. And so we want to support our fishermen and our crew that are working really hard to meet all these requirements, because it's not easy on them.
Yeah, and Peter, how we've come back in 14 years, which is amazing, but how do we not fall backwards? I mean, what have we done to make sure that we don't slide back, that people are following the rules, and how can we help with that?
Mm-hmm. So the management is so strict now. That's really our key moving forward. We can see that it's working. And another thing that's kind of unique here with the West Coast groundfish trawlers is they actually have an extra person on board to observe as essentially another layer of monitoring and regulation. So our crew that you saw in those photos is just a crew of 3 usually. But now every time they go out, there is a 4th person on that boat, and the fishermen have to take on that cost to pay for the extra observer. But the observer is ensuring everything that they catch is written down and documented. And then the same when they're unloading at the dock. They are making sure that everything is accurate, and just a way to help make sure we're doing things correctly.
That that is reassuring, and it does make you feel like you can help bear the burden of that extra cost by buying U.S. caught fish that is a sustainable fishing choice. Use the Seafood Watch app. Use the individual guides. They're out there, and there's thousands of different fish in. I know it. Couple of my local grocery stores, they do include the Monterey-based Seafood Watch color coding and rating on the fish. that they have. So it helps. I had to put my glasses on to see them at the store the other day, but I could make a sustainable choice once I got in close and make sure I was doing the right thing. But it is really a fantastic tool there. There was a question also on, can you explain what happened with Dungeness crab this year? Do you know, Peter?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, this was not a good year for Dungeness crab. There were a ton of different delays, right? So usually we try to have Dungeness crab open for Thanksgiving and especially for Christmas, and that didn't really happen this year. And we talk about those strict regulations. And so the initial delay was actually changes to help protect whales. So there were a lot back over the past decade, there have been issues with whales accidentally getting entangled in these crab pots, and no one wants that. The crabbers don't want that. People that love whales don't want that. And so what they set up is they're able to observe where the whales are in the bay. And if there are too many of them in the bay along the coast, they'll actually delay the season. And so that was the initial delay. But then there was even some delays around prices, arguments around prices. So some of the big seafood companies that are even bigger than us were setting them at a very low price that the fishermen, it wasn't worth them economically. So very complex issues.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. You should mention that with the whales. I know our friends on the East Coast have had a lobster delay for several weeks because they had to move the traps because the whales were migrating much closer to shore than they usually do for exactly the same reason. So I think we were without lobster for 6 to 8 weeks, but they're back. And if you place your order by Sunday, you can have a lobster feed with us next weekend on Saturday on the 15th. We'll have those shipped to you fresh from our sustainable fishermen in Maine are shipping those out from Little Cranberry Island. So get your order in by Sunday if you're going to join us for that great seafood fest. Well, Peter, one of the other things I just have to ask you is there's been, a lot of talk about the Seaspiracy movie on Netflix, and I'm sure many people have seen it and are justifiably concerned for our oceans. But it seems to be quite dramatic, but also raising important questions. Can you give us any light on that film? And
Yes. So I did see Seaspiracy, and it's definitely the talk of the town in my sustainable seafood world and in the seafood industry as a whole. And so the film does a really great job of highlighting the impacts around the seafood industry, which, as myself, as someone that's advocating for sustainable seafood, that's fantastic that people are, learning about these and talking about these issues. The downfall to it is, unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation in the film, and it is very vegan focused. That was kind of their goal. Now, I think going vegan's fantastic and going vegetarian's fantastic, but I also think seafood is a really great sustainable protein that's low carbon and a great option. And unfortunately, the film just didn't highlight any of the success stories, all of the progress that's been made over the past couple of decades, like the West Coast groundfish, for example. And so I just caution people when they watch the film to keep that in mind.
Well, there's a lot of interesting media that we experience today. So we'll leave it at that. And it's always great to check a few extra sources with any kind of data. And if you have more info for us or we're wrong, please share, because we like to know if we're wrong. So thanks for that, Peter. I'm sure Chef will have more questions for you, but let's jump over to him. He's made some excellent choices, of course, tonight. It's Chef Todd, and he's made excellent choices and excellent things for dinner. So to give us all some inspiration, perhaps for mom for Mother's Day, unless you're making pancakes with us on Sunday. So Todd, what are we doing with these fantastic oysters you have in the kitchen?
Well, I do love to show off local oysters, especially since they are a fantastic sustainable product all up and down our coast here, even up towards Oregon, Washington State. There's some really wonderful Pacific Coast oysters. And for the most part, they're really sustainable. It's one of the success stories of aquaculture right here that helps so much. And they happen to go very well with Sauvignon Blanc. You know, they're a fantastic pairing. So I'm always happy to show them off. I am a huge supporter of sustainable seafood. If you joined us last year, you know that I really enjoy that whole subject and topic and support. And so I'm thinking about where we spend our dollars and who we want to support, those local fishermen. And so it's something that's really easy for me to do, you know, kind of piggybacks with our commitment to sustainability for the land and for the grapes and the wine. So why not do that in the kitchen as well? So I'm always happy to do that. And I'm really excited to have Peter back again for a lot of his insight and his expertise here. With the oysters today, simple and clean, very much just on the half shell, which is a popular way to eat them. They're so fresh and vibrant, just like the wine is itself. You know, it's got, the wine has so much of that lime and citrus kind of tone to it. It's got crisp acidity to it. So oysters are a natural go-to. The interesting topping that I'm putting on them for today is actually a frozen ice, which is flavored, and that happens to have some interesting ingredients in there. For one thing, it's verjus, which is essentially some unripened grape juice. And so this was pressed early. It was picked early and pressed early. And what they do is they turn it into almost like a vinegar. It's a very French kind of a thing to do, where you pick the grapes at a much lower degree of bricks. So the sugar has not developed. It's probably picked early, maybe around June, somewhere in through there. And it's intended to be picked early, so that when you press that fresh juice, it's very fresh, it's really intense in acidity. So you will pick up maybe a little bit of the grape flavor in there. It's not going to taste like the wine by any means. It doesn't have any alcohol in it. It's not allowed to ferment, but it's so tart. You use it in place of like a vinegar. And in this case, I thought it would work fantastic to almost flavor that with some of the same ingredients that you might find in a mignonette, a classic mignonette dressing that you might find. And so here I have some cucumbers. I also have some chives and shallots, and you can put some black pepper in there as well. But by taking those and chopping them up and blending them, pureeing it into the verjus itself, and you can find verjus maybe in a specialty grocery store. If you check online, you can find it. You blend it all up so it's almost like a loose kind of a slushy, and then pour it into a dish, a baking dish, so that, or a flat dish, excuse me, so that you can put it into the freezer and it'll freeze in a thin layer. Now, once you have that, it's going to end up basically freezing almost like a popsicle. Let me show you what that looks like.
Todd, Michael also has a question. What about the old adage of oysters should only be eaten months with an R?
You know, that did have a lot of impact way back in the day, and it had to do with a lot of the temperatures that were in those months when the water temperature would raise. There was any concern that there might have been some parasitic growth or some algae bloom in the waters themselves. We find that that's not so much of an issue anymore. The West Coast here tends to be colder than actually the East Coast, believe it or not, because of the cold currents that are heading up towards Alaska and through there. There's a natural circulation. And so the waters tend to be really cold. But all of these farms do have their waters tested all the time to make sure that they're up to safety standards. There are times, very rare, but they will not be able to harvest their oysters from the farm that they have right there. But this is essentially what the ice or the slushy kind of looks like. That's verjus. You can see that there's blended in chives. There's cucumber in there, including the cucumber solids. So it's really flavorful. And basically, you're going to just take it from there, the granité, and you can chop it all up or use a fork and kind of just shave it. It's like shaved ice right on top of an oyster, but it's wonderfully flavored, just like it's incredible how much it really tastes like a mignonette, and it really pairs up well. This particular flavor, it's so much like an oyster. It's incredible. So I'm going to go ahead and shuck this. This is a Marin Miyagi oyster. So this is a Pacific variety, originally from Japan, and they're very prolific here on the west coast of California. And so they have a beautiful colored kind of a shell. The hinge is down here where you want to try to pop open the oyster, as opposed to the round curly fluted edge here that you see in West Coast oysters, Pacific, versus the East Coast oysters, which were a little more flat and rounded, thicker shell. What I'm going to do is basically use a towel, and I have an oyster shucker. You don't want to use a paring knife or any other kind of a blade that might actually break or chip or break the tip off, or even worse, cut yourself. So with this towel, I'm going to hold it and basically put the tip of the oyster shucker in at the hinge and just kind of twist gently until it pops. slight pressure forward into it. And once I feel it pop, then I will go ahead and scrape the upper edge of the shell, the top shell, to kind of remove the top shell off there. So I'm scraping kind of upwards. And then once you remove that, you want to go through and you want to take a look for any shells or fragments or bits here that you might actually get into your mouth. Sometimes it happens with these thinner shells. And then you want to also release that little abductor muscle there where it's connected to the bottom. So now it's loose and free and it's ready to be enjoyed on the half shell. So I went ahead and did some of these up ahead of time. I have them on a bed of ice here. So as you can see, these are the Marin Miyagis, really beautiful, nice and fresh. They have a nice brininess. They definitely have that salinity coming from the ocean there. Nice and fresh and very well ranked in the Seafood Watch as far as a great sustainable product. And so now what I'm going to do is basically take this crushed ice and put right on top. So it's going to be nice and cold and refreshing. It's the same flavoring element, but it's also a sensation because it's cold. And if you have a glass of our Sauvignon Blanc with this, you just put some of this shaved granite right up over the top. Should be a wonderful pairing.
Oh, it's a party.
There we go.
Gorgeous.
Decorate as you will. Now this one in particular would go really well with the Sauvignon Blanc because of the acid in that verjus. If you were to want to maybe go a little spicy, like a lot of people like hot sauce or things like that, you can still do that. But you may want to also pop open a bottle of our Moscato. You know, we were talking about our Moscato up from Dollarhide. If you pop open a bottle of our Moscato, if you go super spicy, that's going to work probably even better for you. Although there's a classic match with Sauvignon Blanc. If you go spicy, I think it's going to work even better if you go with a Moscato because of the fact that it has some residual sugar, and there's also some lower alcohol in there. So what that will do is kind of tame down some of the harshness that some of the spice will add to it, and it'll still be a really delicious match because our Moscato does have a nice crisp acid still to it. So even though it has a bit of sweetness to it, it still has some really wonderful acid for the finish. So that should be really delicious kind of a mix. You can see that it's starting to slowly melt. You want to gulp them down and kind of chew on it when it's nice and frozen there. So it's a fun way to enjoy these.
Oh, they're beautiful, Todd. Absolutely beautiful.
Thanks.
And just wonderful. Again,
Peter, maybe you can add in any of your thoughts on some of the local oysters. I know you're down in the Monterey area there. Any difference or preference on East Coast, West Coast, farmed or wild? Any of your input on oysters would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Oh man, I love all oysters for the most part. I mean, if anything, I just highly encourage people to try oysters if they never have before. I know it can be a little daunting for some people, but bivalves in general. So those are clams, mussels, oysters, scallops. Those are some of the most sustainable options you can find. I mean, 95% of oysters are going to be farmed, and all they require is raw seawater to grow them. And they actually help clean our oceans and waterways and make them healthier. So it's a great option. I think it's fantastic that you're highlighting them today, Chef Todd. I don't think I necessarily have a favorite. There's 5 different kinds of oysters from what I understand here in North America. But yeah, they're great options. A flathead screwdriver can work too. I don't encourage that, but I
didn't want to say
ones.
That, but yeah, if you're camping out towards the coast and you forgot your oyster shucker, you can go into the toolbox.
yeah, but I think we've all done that. But there is a great demo of Chef Todd redoing the oyster shucking quite well. If you're not a pro at it, on our YouTube channel, check out his bonus track there. With an oyster shucker, not a screwdriver.
Yeah. So another option here that I love to use is again a great sustainable product that comes from the other coast, from New Bedford, Massachusetts. Fantastic dry scallops. So these are dry packed scallops. They're incredible in size. They're called, when we order them, chef speak, it's a U10, under 10. So there's under 10, 10 and under in a pound, basically, which means that they're beautiful in size and shape. They have this wonderful kind of texture to them. They never go into any kind of a saltwater solution or a solution that would basically preserve them or anything. They're as natural as can be. And so when they go out on these boats with these, they basically shuck them right on the boat. They will put them into some burlap bags that they can basically, cheesecloth kind of bags that they can allow them to drain. And then they'll put them into the hull and frozen, keep them as close as possible to cold temperature on ice until they can bring them in to the shore. And then they're basically sold right from there. So all the other shells and all the other innards and everything else from the whole cleaning process, they end up going back into the ocean there. But they are a dry pack, so they never really have any added solutions or chemicals or preservatives, or even some of those nasty kind of chemical things that they put into them that will cause them to actually plump up a little bit more, to weigh more, to look even bigger. So these are about as sweet and natural as possible. You can obviously saute these, sear these, get that beautiful crust, develop that umami to go with it. But with our particular wine and showing off the natural beauty of all of this, I thought it would be great to do a raw preparation on this. If you're not familiar with that, you can have a raw type of a scallop in a sushi bar. They do all kinds of preparations, all of different countries where they'll do what is called a crudo, which basically raw scallop, which is sliced very thinly, and then dressed with different ingredients, a little acid in there, and usually some oil of some sort. So it creates almost like this vinaigrette that you dress it with. So if you want to taste a pure scallop the way that it naturally is, this is a fantastic way to do it. And so by choosing selected scallops like this, it's a great way to show off just how wonderful they are. What I did ahead of time, and it's on the recipe as well, I want to take some really cold water, ice water, in fact, just enough to cover the amount of scallops that you have. Soak them in that along with some sea salt. So if you have a tablespoon or two of sea salt, you want to dissolve that in there. So it creates almost like a sea salt natural water brine, and it's going to help to kind of set the outside. It'll help to clean them. Any of the sand or little bits or grit might come off into that water as well. So it's a good thing to do. And then also what it does is kind of flavor the scallops as well, right? They're incredibly sweet, but you want to definitely have some salt or some seasoning on there as well. The other thing you want to do when you have these scallops is take a look, because you're looking for any little bits of flecks of shell or sand or grit, but you're also going to look for, and these ones are pretty clean, there's also oftentimes what they call like a boot or a foot, and it's a muscle that goes along the side that's very tough. You might need to just peel that off. It's got some chewy ligament to it, and it's not a tender part of it. So almost every scallop, as they are shucked out of the shell, they may still have that intact on the side there. These are all nice and clean. So keep an eye out for that so that you don't end up with a really chewy kind of a part and you're wondering what happened there. To go along with these, I'm going to garnish with a few other fun ingredients. What I decided to do for the form of acid is to use some neutral rice vinegar, which is fantastic, nice and clean. I'm also, because of the fact that there's citrus and grapefruit kind of tones in the Sauvignon Blanc, I'm going to use some fresh grapefruit, not only the juice to squeeze over it to kind of emulate that citrus, but also some of the zest off of the skin there. So that's going to add a nice kind of aromatic to it. And then I'm also going to add some crunch for garnish on this, right? Because it is basically a very soft, creamy kind of a dish, but I'm going to add some shaved radishes and also some cucumber slices. I happen to have some microgreens, which are delicious. They add a little bit of pep and spice to it, depending on the type of microgreens that you have. And a fun ingredient that I've used here before that I make here in-house is actually some saffron infused sea salt. And so what I do is take some of our Sauvignon Blanc, a little bit, and a pinch of saffron threads, that expensive spice that is so floral, fragrant, and also gives off that beautiful yellow color. And I basically steep that in and reduce it down to a syrup. And then once that syrup is cool, I will coat that over some sea salt crystals and allow it to dry and kind of dehydrate. Then I can use it as a seasoning agent. And that's what I want you to do on each of these pieces of scallop. So it adds a little crunch and texture as well as the flavor in there. Plus, it's also a great seasoning ingredient. You can see that from our friends just up the way past Sacramento, Sar Nicolai caviar. This is actually some whitefish roe that I'm going to garnish with, because I love to add extra fun things like that onto the dish, give it more complexity. And it definitely goes well with the Sauvignon Blanc. So to show you how I'm going to do this, I'll take a very sharp knife The scallops then, after they were brined for about 10 minutes, I remove them out and I just pat them dry. And what I'm going to do is slice them. And so basically what you do is take your scallop with a very sharp knife, and you want to start with the heel and just kind of drag it through straight through, and as thin as possible. If you can imagine, you know, an eighth to a quarter of an inch, beautiful right there. Just really clean and natural and fresh. If you like ceviche, sometimes you can have a raw scallop. That way, it's a very popular thing to have as well. It's just beautiful. Nice translucency in there.
Will
And
you
so by
sharpen
slicing
my
them very
knives, Dad?
thin, I'm sorry?
Will you sharpen my knives for me? Look at that knife. It's so nice and sharp. Oh my goodness.
Like so. And so now you have some beautiful thin slices that can absorb the flavors that you're going to dress them with. Of course, I already have some done ahead just to save time. And what I did was I arranged them out on the plate. So as you can see here, really beautiful.
Beautiful.
You can take and just garnish as much as you'd like on there. This is a great appetizer, great way to start off your meal. You could do this on maybe on a really hot day. You've got nice chilled scallops with a chilled bottle of Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh,
And now to dress it, basically, a lot of these different ingredients that I have here, I'm going to make sure that I put a decent amount of that saffron salt on top of each one. Flavor, color, texture.
and even though you brined them, it still needs a little bit of salt.
It does, yes, it does, because that's only on the outside and it was for such a really short time. And then what you want to do is kind of garnish in, and you can do it as decoratively if you want, as you want. You can put in the little bits of cucumber for crunch and texture, that refreshing kind of cucumber
Beautiful.
flavor goes really well. Sauvignon Blanc, right? Crunchy. Every time I think of that, I'm thinking of that kind of texture and flavor profile. And then, of course, some radishes, multiple colors, really beautiful. Little pepperiness in these sometimes.
Well, I hope everybody has their cucumber seeds planted because this is going to be a great summer dish. Oh
That
my,
would be great. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of microgreens. Colorful, beautiful. Again, a little bit of pep in there. Sometimes they might have a little kind of a mustardy kind of a finish on them. It all depends. There's a lot of different types of microgreens. And
super
then
great.
let's go with some of our acid here. So this is an important part. You can actually have this kind of sit for a little bit so that the acid can kind of do its thing. It will start to kind of denature the raw protein of the scallop a little bit. You don't necessarily want to cook it all the way like to the point where it turns white. But there's your fresh grapefruit juice on there. Here's your zest, which is going to be very aromatic.
Beautiful.
You smell that right away, just how fragrant that is. And then you go to put your nose into the glass of the Sauvignon Blanc and they create this really nice bridge. And then, of course, a little bit of some of the rice vinegar for just a little bit more acid. So it really picks up a lot of that umami. It kind of offsets how rich the umami is on there. You can use extra virgin olive oil as an oil on here. I'm going to go ahead and put just a bit of some Meyer lemon infused oil that I made here from our estate olives or estate Meyer lemons. Just a bit there. So it's almost like a vinaigrette, as I was mentioning. Nice. And then let's garnish with some of that really nice whitefish roe.
Oh, very decadent.
Nice and fresh. Really, you know, the scallop is definitely going to, the natural flavor will stand through, even with all of these wonderful kind of ingredients that are added on there. And if you have a nice glass of Sauvignon Blanc with that crisp acid, it'll be a nice kind of palate refresher for each bite that you have, each sip that you take. Should be beautiful.
Oh, Todd, I'm going to come running up there to steal that. That's gorgeous. All
I
that
hope you give this one a try as well. You know, between the scallops and a nice dish like this, very refreshing. If you let it sit maybe just a few minutes, you're going to find the salt and the acid will start to kind of permeate and kind of marinate the scallops just a little bit more. probably even better from there.
It's so pretty as well.
Peter, what are your thoughts on scallops? These are the day scallops from over in the East Coast. I know that there's difference between bay scallops as well. Any thoughts on sourcing these and what to look for?
Wow, those are beautiful. You did such a fantastic job with them, chef. Yeah, I mean, again, scallops are going to be a great option. They're bivalves again. So those clams, mussels, oysters, scallops that are really a great option. That's another one that you can find wild or farmed. And Seafood Watch has a lot of recommendations on there. I did see one question earlier about other tips people can look at on labels when they're looking for their seafood. And one thing people can look for is certain eco certifications like the Marine Stewardship Council, also known as the MSC. It's a blue check mark. There's the ASC Aquaculture Stewardship Council, as well as BAP, Best Aquaculture Practices. And so unfortunately, not every eco certification is going to be the most credible, but those are 3 that you can look out for. They're listed on Seafood Watch. My company, Loose America Foods, we do a lot of it for different businesses as well. So if there's any businesses on the West Coast, we're happy to help supply some seafood for you. We have locations all across the West Coast.
Awesome. So anything, Peter, on dredging? I've heard, different ways of getting to the scallops to make sure that we're not getting something that's, destroying the ocean floor.
So a lot of the wild scallops are caught with dredges, and that is going to have a little bit more of an environmental impact, right? Because it's disrupting the sea floor essentially. Thankfully, a lot of it is here from the US and managed well, but that is going to be yellow rated, for example, whereas there are options where farming them can be green rated.
Excellent. Yeah, good point. Good point. So, chef, what's next? I mean, there's so many delights in the kitchen today.
Yeah, we're really kind of going for it. A lot of variety here, from oysters to scallops, raw. The theme kind of staying with raw, but also adding a little sear to this particular fish. Happens to be featuring one that I've used before that I'm really happy to show off. And this comes from the Big Island in Hawaii, and this is Kampachi. So Kampachi is an amberjack fish. It's kind of related closely to hamachi. Flavor profile and texture maybe is a little softer and a little more mild, but it has a wonderful kind of buttery, healthy omega-3 kind of fats and oils in there. And I love to cook it or use it raw. I've done poke with this before. I'm going to do a seared version, and I have also cooked it as a main part of the dish itself. So this will be done in almost like a sashimi style, but there will be a method or a technique over the top there called tataki in Japanese, where it means like to pound or to blister, or kind of like even to bruise. So the idea is that you're going to go into a really hot pan and kind of sear blister the outside edge there. And what I thought I would do to kind of make it even more fun is use some interesting chili powder mix. This is called Shiichimi Togarashi. It's basically a seven spice mixture. It's used quite often in Japan. You might even find it at like ramen bars. So you'll find the little shaker which you put over your hot noodles. And essentially what it is some Japanese red chili peppers that are dried. There's usually some orange peel in there. The orange, that's kind of chopped up and ground up in there as well as some Japanese pepper. There's also some sesame seeds in there. And this is kind of a fun, lighter style of a spice that you can put on the outside of it. What I need to do basically is take this fish and kind of season it lightly. So I'm going to use a little bit of sea salt. So even though I'm going to serve this with a Ponzu sauce, and the version that I have listed on there is fairly simple and basic and really easy. And there's a lot of different variations on Ponzu. And Ponzu is essentially a sauce that has soy. It has rice vinegar, citrus juice in there, and usually some sweet rice wine, mirin. And so if you use any of those, I get a lot of products from Kikkoman and they're really fantastic. I grew up with those. And so I use them to make my own. You can also find Ponzu sauce straight off the shelf too as well. It's a nice lighter variation as opposed to using straight soy sauce. It's already got a balance of those wonderful things like salt, so for the sodium, sour, and sweet. So it's really fun, and it's a lightweight to show off delicate fish like this. And so I have that already made ahead. What I'm going to do is take that piece of Kampachi and roll it right into this chili powder mix. You can do this as much or as little as you like, depending on how spicy you like it. And just enough to kind of coat all the way around. What I'm going to do is sear this off. And initially, I was warming up a cast iron pan here. And so what you want to do is make sure that you have a hot pan, that you can get a hot sear on all the sides, in and out very quickly. I'm going to use a neutral oil with a high smoke point. In this case, this is like a canola oil. You don't want to use an oil that's going to smoke right away at a lower temperature and give off some kind of nasty, bitter flavors. So you want to use one that has a high smoke point, and canola oil should work pretty well for this. So what I'm going to do is basically add that oil, just a little bit, enough to coat the bottom of the pan. You might see a little bit of the first smoke or wisp of white smoke, and the oil might also shimmer in the pan. That'll tell you that it's hot enough. What this is going to do is basically create that tataki kind of a texture on the outside. A lot of times you might find some chefs will use a torch and they'll blister it with a torch on the outside. It's kind of the same idea of kind of partially cooking it on the outside, but this is kind of a fun interpretation of that. All right, so I'm seeing a little bit of just a quick smoke. What I'm going to do is put it in, and I'm going to sear it for maybe only about 5, 6, 8 seconds at the most on each side so I can turn it. I want to keep it nice and rare on the inside, sashimi style. It's just blistering on the outside. So that's going to toast all those spices. So in, just let it sit. If you have too much oil in there, it's going to almost pan fry. So you want to be careful of that.
Okay.
And if it does get a little too smoky, you might want to turn on your fan. Plus the fact that you're toasting some dried chili spice in there, and sometimes that really can get to your throat and your nose and your eyes. So you want to be careful there. All right, so once you have that kind of a nice sear on it, I want to go ahead and turn it. And I'm really just looking to get that, 1/16 of an inch on the outside there.
It's very quick too. It looks beautiful, Todd.
Very quick. So it doesn't take very long. And you can serve this straight out of the pan. It'll be kind of a hot, cold type of a thing, which is kind of fun and interesting. Or you can make it ahead of time and just refrigerate it. So you can chill it down.
I always kind of like the hot cold is sort of a fun.
It's kind of fun sometimes, yeah. All right, so it's just that quick. I'm not going to worry about searing the sides. I'll leave those. So as you can see, all the sides nicely seared.
Beautiful.
What I'm going to do is go ahead and slice it and garnish it really simply. Again, sharp knife. And if you happen to have maybe some nice cucumbers, pickled cucumbers, Japanese cucumber salad, or even the mixed seaweed salad that you might find so delicious, it goes really well with it. It's a great accent to it. So what I'm going to do is slice again, one drag through, hopefully starting from the heel to the toe. And I'm going to slice a fairly thick slice, just like so.
Beautiful. There's a question coming in from online. Any substitutions or changes you would make if preparing ahi instead of kampachi?
You can do the same thing. And in fact, ahi is probably the most common or most popular one that you might find. So it works as well. I've done plenty of that. You might find the classic one where there's sesame seeds on the outside. My signature thing was to put seaweed mixture on the outside as well, called furikake. So you can do either one of those, any of those. Tuna works fantastic for it. Any of the fish that you can do raw, you can do in this kind of form.
Gorgeous.
So right onto the plate like so.
We're going to be rochambeauing for dishes up there in the kitchen.
There we go, something like that. And then I happen to have a salad mix from the garden, just shaved vegetables, basically, tiny bit of salt. maybe just a squeeze of lemon in there.
My carrots aren't that big yet.
Little squeeze of lemon juice to brighten it up. Or again, if you want to put a little more rice vinegar in there, you could do that as well. So colorful, crunchy, kind of a contrast. Great appetizer. And then that ponzu sauce, I'm going to drizzle right onto the plate so you can kind of just wash every slice through it. If you wanted to serve a little extra on the side, obviously you could do that as well.
Oh, it's so pretty.
Some shaved carrots, multicolored carrots, some radish, some fennel. Of course, cucumbers.
It's really pretty. Yeah, and Hawaiian Kampachi is a great product. Earlier, I was talking about some of those eco certifications, and Hawaiian Kampachi is certified by the Aquaculture Stewardship Council and recommended by the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch program. So a great option. We just started distributing it at Loose America Foods and are really excited about it.
Yeah, it's really a fantastic product. I love the way that they've developed that whole farming where they start on tanks inland and then they move out to an open range. So it's almost like open ocean ranching in a sense. So that as the fish get larger, they're able to swim to develop more of their muscle. And they're basically out in these open pens out in the ocean.
Mhm.
They start from all the way, they start them off from the eggs. And they go all the way through from tanks in good circulated, recirculated water that's filtered through. So just some of the ponzu sauce right on top there. A few other simple garnishes, sesame for a little nuttiness.
Oh, nice.
And then also some green onions, some scallions are always delicious with this kind of a dish. Yeah, this is a fantastic fish. It's got that wonderful kind of buttery oil to it that's really healthy.
Oh,
Looks out well.
another beautiful presentation, Chef.
Thank
You
you.
outdone yourself. Great tips for all of us for Sauvignon Blanc Day, as Dezel pointed out, is tomorrow, starting tonight in New Zealand and Asia, and wonderful pairings for that. But also, if you're there with your Moscato, you can make it a little bit spicier. And May 9th is National Moscato Day. You know, St. Supéry started the hashtag Sauvignon Blanc Day in 2010. Gosh, I can't believe it was that long ago. But, you know, do celebrate with us all day long, even continuing tonight with some of our friends from around the world who are making fantastic Sauvignon Blanc, whether it's in Mexico, Chile, Uruguay, and North America, New Zealand, Australia. We'll all be together. So do enjoy that. Lots of great chats tomorrow if you just want to take a break and check out Instagram or Twitter to see what's going on. And of course, next week we're having chowder. On Thursday and Saturday, we're having lobster. This Sunday for Mother's Day, Todd, you and I are doing pancakes together. It's going to be so much fun. So if you need some inspiration, we are here in the kitchen at St. Supéry, bringing wonderful things to you. And we hope to see you soon. Thanks so much for joining us. And until we see you next time, be well, be kind, and cheers. See you all soon.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Peter,
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you guys.
eat sustainable seafood.
I think we're all hungry now.
Very.
Thanks a lot.
Night, everybody.
Thank you.